I don't even know if this is, hello? Oh, there we are. Thank you. Okay, it's time. I have a couple announcements before we get into our lesson. First one is, if you're still collecting stuff for the homeless, I just talked to Amy Green in the hallway, and she says we are low on 2 things. She said, you've been awesome. They've gotten lots and lots of things in, and they very much appreciate it. But 2 things they're low on are hand warmers and socks. So if you want to do it, if you haven't done something already and want to get something, hand warmers and socks is what they still need. And then from Melissa Hale, she said there is a Secret Sisters potluck this Saturday on the mezzanine at 10 a.m. And I'm just reading what she told me to say. Only existing Secret Sisters are to bring a gift, if possible, for when they have the big reveal. New Secret Sisters will draw names. If you have any questions, you can call Melissa. And I'll give you her phone number later. I'm not sure that's appropriate to do that right now. It's like, then, okay, for Christmas, this is kind of exciting. We're already planning Christmas things. Because Christmas week, we want to do something special. So our Grace family meal on December 11th, they want to make it more Christmassy and more special. So Paige Gill asked if I would ask you guys if we can have a dessert table so we have more. Usually they just give one cookie. You get your meal and you get a cookie. But she said if some ladies could make some extra desserts, they could have a dessert table. So if anyone would like to bring a dessert of any kind, 2 dozen of something or a 9x13 pan, bring it December 11th or a day or 2 before, and she can refrigerate it if it can sit. And that's from Paige Gill. So contact Paige if you want to do a dessert, and Melissa on Secret Sisters. Okay, I think that's all the announcements. Sadly, we are coming to the end of this series, and it's been so fun. We are on lesson 10. We're going to talk about Joshua and Rahab. And we're in not only Hebrews 11, of course, but back in Joshua mostly chapters 1 and 2, a little bit in 6. So if you turn to either one of those, we'll have a word of prayer and we'll begin. Dear Heavenly Father, I thank you for this study. I thank you for how much I've learned, and I always and will forever be grateful that we can trust your word as being true. I thank you for the ladies that have come out for this series, those who might be listening online. I pray that you would just really, truly open up our hearts and minds to truth you would have for us today. Holy Spirit, I just pray that you would be with us and be our teacher and bless us as we spend time with you in your word. In your name I pray, amen. Alrighty. I don't know where, I found a cool thing this morning. I just don't know where it's going to fit. So back to our Hebrews 11. So Jody took you the last couple of weeks, and you did Moses, part 1, Moses, part 2, and they've crossed the Red Sea. And so this is where we're picking up, and it's like a time warp thing here, because after they crossed the Red Sea, of course, they wandered in the desert for 40 years. So we're at the edge, we're at the other side of the desert now. Now Moses has died, he has put hands on Joshua and anointed him, and now Joshua and the children of Israel are about to cross the Jordan River and go into the Promised Land. So in this lesson, it's only, like the Hebrews part of it is only 2 verses, and then of course we go for the backstory. So in Hebrews, the 2 verses we'll be covering are 11, 30, and 31. It says, by faith, the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. By faith, the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace. So that's our two main people, and now we expound on their story. There we go. So in that first verse, it says Joshua's name isn't even there. says the walls were surrounded by faith. The walls fell. So we know it was Joshua because there's that kid's song that tells us, and there's VeggieTales that tells us. It's like, I can see the French peas dancing on the wall. Your brain must be very small if you think walking will be knocking down our wall. But we know it's true, and that's what happened. And then, so Joshua's in here because the walls of Jericho fell down. Rahab is in here because she received the spies with peace, and she believed in their God. That's why she's in here. She did not perish with those who did not believe, because she had received the spies. She believed in their God. So before Moses died, he had laid his hands on Joshua to lead the people. And then she says here, what did he say about Joshua in Deuteronomy 34:9? And we learn there that Joshua, because Moses anointed him, was full of the spirit of wisdom. So the children of Israel heeded him and did as the Lord had commanded Moses. It's like Moses was held in such high esteem, but Moses put Joshua up in front of them, saying, this is the new guy. Listen to him, do what he says. And the Spirit of the Lord was on Joshua now. And he led the people, and they believed him and heeded him and did as he commanded. So then we come to Joshua chapter 1, verses 2 through 9. And God has all this stuff for Joshua. You read these section of verses, and there's commands and there's promises. And the first time I read through them, I put a C by a verse that was command and a P by a verse that was promise. So I got commands, promises. And then she says, summarize it. And then gives us this much space. I was like, I can't do that. So I got a separate piece of paper, and I did column because I'm going to list them because I want to see them. So if you start with verse 2, the first one is a command. He says, cross the Jordan River, you and all the people, to the land I am going to give them. So verse 2 is a command. Verse 3 is a promise. For every place that the sole of your foot treads, I'm going to give that to you. That's a promise he made to Joshua. Then we come to verse 5. No man shall be able to stand before you all the days of your life. What a promise is that? You're going to be victorious your whole life. Yes. And then he says, like 3 promises here. Then he tells Joshua, as I was with Moses, so will I be with you. I will be with you. You're going to be victorious, and I'm going to be with you. And number 3, I will not leave you or forsake you. It's like, and that verse is also in Hebrews, where we're studying Hebrews 13:5. I will never leave you or forsake you. Joshua, you're going to be victorious. Nobody's going to be going to survive against you, and I'm going to be with you the whole way. Wouldn't that pump you up? That's like a pep talk right there. You got this. I'm asking you to do this huge thing, but I'm doing it with you. I'm not sending you off by yourself. And then in verse 6, this is a command, folks. This is a command. Be strong and of good courage. He just gave him 3 promises. Now he says, now you go be strong. I just told you I'm going to be with you. You got this. Go be strong. Be strong and of good courage. For you shall divide an inheritance, as an inheritance, the land I swore to their fathers to give them. Verse 7, be strong and courageous. Again, that you may obey all the instructions. Then he could say, do not turn to the right or left, but that could be a subpoint under be strong and courageous. So you can do what I'm telling you to do. Verse 8, another command. Study this book of instruction continually. And I think I got that one out of New Living because I just like the way it says it. Study this book of instruction continually. Meditate on it day and night so that you'll be sure to obey everything written in it. Only then will you prosper and be successful in all you do. So, and I know if you haven't ever been in any kid program, this verse has been memorized since 12 at least. So it's not like God's just telling this to Joshua. He's telling it to us today. Do you want to be successful? Read your Bible. Meditate on the truth that's in there. Study this book. You can study other books, but study this book of instruction continually. Not every once in a while, once in a blue moon, once a year, continually, and meditate on it. Think about it. Navigators keeps wanting me to do this 7-day memory verse plan, and they'll say, we're going to give you prompts for a week and tell you all the different ways you can look at this verse. First, write it out in different colors. Write it out and put it in different places. Now just write down the first letter of each word and see if you can still say it. Okay, now do a fill in the blanks. But if you do that for a week, you're going to start learning that verse. So meditate on it day and night so that you can be sure to obey. And then when you're obeying, then you're going to prosper. And it doesn't mean that, claim it, name it, claim it stuff. It means with God, you're going to mature and grow to be a godly Christian if this is the book you're studying. And then in verse 9, this is my command for the third time, be strong and courageous. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid or discouraged. And then the last promise at the end of verse 9. For the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. Even if I ask you to step across the Jordan River and go into uncharted territory and you have no clue what's going on, the Lord your God is with you wherever you go. And then as I was reading this, I found a note in my Bible, because she says 3 times, he says, be strong and courageous. 3 times God reminded Joshua to be strong and courageous. The Hebrew word for strong refers to sound legs, while the word for courage refers to having a secure grip, or grasp, Joshua's success as a leader depended on A, standing firm, standing strong, and holding on tight. I thought, that is really good. That is really good. Standing strong and holding tight. So, and then she asked you in the book, so why do you think God told him be strong and courageous so many times? He probably needed it. He needed to be encouraged. It's like the coach in the locker room giving the team a pep talk. Be strong and courageous. Come on, say it with me. Be strong and courageous. Come on, you got it. Be strong and courageous. And then they all put their hands, go. And they're going to go. God knew he was giving him this huge, huge, huge job to do. Not just you going across the river, you and 2 million people going across the river, and you're going to conquer all the land, all the bad guys in that other side of the river. He probably needed to be encouraged. So God knew he was giving a huge mission and to encourage him. It was like you got this in the locker room. And then she says, we're going to do that one in the groups. Top of page 56, 4B will be to go over in groups, because I'm going to move on. And we're not going to do 5. We're going to move that farther down to another page because you can't, that's not valid at this point in time. Because they haven't even crossed the river yet, so they haven't had their first battle yet, and she's asking if they assumed that conquering the promised land would be easier than it was. They have no idea yet, because they haven't even put their foot in the water yet. So we're going to move that question back. But when you talk about conquering promised lands, oh my goodness. What promised lands have you had that were harder to occupy than you anticipated? And my answer was, moving into this building took forever. So Janice knows, Carla knows. Was anybody else here when we were moving into this building? Yay, Delia knows. So, okay, before I get into that, I found this just this morning, and it sounds like a devotional, but it was in a commentary. How is that? By this great miracle, the crossing of the Jordan River at flood stage by a nation of about 2 million people, here's what happened. God was glorified, Joshua was exalted, Israel was encouraged, and the Canaanites were terrorized. For Israel, the crossing of the Jordan meant they were irrevocably committed to a struggle against armies, chariots, and fortified cities. They were also committed to walk by faith in the living God and to turn from walking according to the flesh as they'd often done in the wilderness. So for us today, crossing the Jordan represents passing from one level of the Christian life into another. It's a picture of entering spiritual warfare to claim what God has promised. It's going to be a fight. He says, I promised you this, whatever it is, but it's not like you're just going to go in and sit at the table. You're going to have to fight for it. This should mean the end of a life lived by human effort and the beginning of a life lived by faith and obedience. It's like, amen and amen, and how timely for right now. So and this is like, because when we moved into this building, from the time Bill and Dennis looked through the doors to the time we're living here, it was like 3 years. And it was like this is never going to happen. First, there's financing. And yes, we're buying the building, but financing took forever and a day. We had to do, this didn't work, this bank wouldn't give us money, so we got to try another. We ended up getting money from a bank in Europe because somebody found they had a teeny tiny percentage rate where the banks here were charging us a big percentage rate. So that was a whole deal. And then there's things that had to be fixed, and then you have to have electricity hooked up, and then you can't occupy it until that elevator's working, and it was out of commission for years. And so that has to be there were so many things that had to be fixed before we can even come in. And then we couldn't have church here because it's a really huge big mess, so we had the tent in the parking lot. So it seats like 500 people, I think, and then it started to rain. And we had borrowed chairs from other churches. And so when it rains, you just put your feet up on the rungs. We had girls, a lot of us brought Afghans with us. You wrap the Afghan around your legs and put your feet up on the rungs of the chair so you don't get wet. And the only rooms we got finished right away were upstairs. We had a toddler nursery, a baby nursery, and the bathrooms upstairs was the only thing we could use in this building until and then it was going to snow, and then we had to move the tent in the building. And when we didn't have all these rooms built, this is just a big hole. So imagine a 500-person tent moved inside the building, and it snowed the very next day. But watching them put up the tent, and then they got to take down the tent, put up the tent inside the building. And then it's still cold in the building, even though it snows outside. And we had to get heaters that sit outside the tent, but have big hosey things that go under the lip of the tent so we could be warm. And we still brought our Afghans. And sometimes we'd have a pile of them by the door in case anybody still needed one. And that was forever. And we'd have bridges of plywood over all the cords that run in. And security people that had to keep little boys from playing with their skateboards because all this cement was so cool for them, but there was all these dips where they'd pulled out big stuff and there's a hole, you can't fall in there. We didn't want it to be our fault. So, and there was always drywall dust, always drywall dust. Nobody dressed up to come to church. You wore khakis or jeans, and they'd have a men's prayer meeting, and if Bill was on his knees and his heels hit his butt, he'd have dirt all over his butt, and one of the guys would walk up to me and say, Cindy, you're gonna have to wipe him off because we can't. Yeah, it's like, and where the office is right now, that didn't used to have a glass-in wall there. That wasn't there. There was a white table with a jug of water and Dixie cups and a container of disinfectant wipes. And we wiped off the table all the time. And I remember standing on the mezzanine looking down when it was just cement. I watched them put the first tile in the middle of that. And just envisioning, this room wasn't here. These walls weren't here. It's like, that room wasn't there. Classrooms weren't here. Classrooms were up on the mezzanine with room dividers. We had those portable demolition parties. We had wheelbarrows, and we'd knock stuff down, and then you have parties to haul it out. The pizza party was the best one. The whole mezzanine used to be indoor-outdoor carpeting, halfway up the wall, halfway around all those posts. Men came in ahead of time and scored the carpet, and then we pulled it up, and we had an assembly line and threw it down the stairs because there was a big truck waiting outside the door on this side. And when we got all the carpet pulled out of there, we ordered pizzas, and whoever came to help rip up carpet, we had a pizza party. The cool part was one of the kids in youth group got saved that night. Having a carpet ripping pizza party. It's like when we looked in the door, I'm thinking, oh, we're gonna have a new church, it's gonna be so cool. And it just one thing after another. It's like, what promised lands have you had that were harder to occupy than you anticipated? This was it. This is it. Because it's still in process. We still need more space, so we're still building, and there's still drywall dust. But God is doing so much, so much. When we first were in the auditorium, it was drywall, and we had an orange tarp across the back because there was no door, there was no ante-room thing, and there was a big sheet or tarp across there. I think the first Easter anyway was just some kind of a sheet or tarp up to keep the cold air from going in. Anyway, God has brought us so far. Glory to God. So that's my story about claiming a promised land that was harder, because it was harder. Now to the fun story. So, before crossing the Jordan River, Joshua sent spies to Jericho. So we're going to go to Joshua chapter 2, because this is the fun part. So they stayed in the house of a prostitute, a harlot. And then the king, and part of my guessing is that if there was a house there, that would be like, some people say she was also an innkeeper, but you know, a madam. What can I say? It's like, it is what it is. But that would be a gathering place, like in the old West movies, the saloon. That's where people go. Where's this, where's that? So, and that's also where they might be able to remain anonymous for some, but apparently either their hair color, whatever, they were given away. Somebody noticed, hey, there's strangers in town, and we think we know where they came from. So the king tells Rahab, I hear there's two strangers. We think they're Israelites. Bring them to me. They got to go. Well, the king asked her, she said, you know, I'm thinking of Gunsmoke in Miss Kitty. You know, I think them cowboys were here earlier, but about the time they're closing the city gates, I think they left. You might go down that road, and if you go real fast, you might catch up with them. But really, she'd hidden them on the roof under the flax. And see, then I had to go on a bunny trail and find out what flax was. Did you know linen is made out of flax? I did not know this. And they don't want you to cut it off at the ground. You pull it up by the roots, because then it extends the fibers that are in there, and they get better, softer fibers if they pull it up by the roots. See, all those things you didn't even know you needed to know. Okay, okay, so she's hiding the spies up on the roof under her flax that she's drying. I love her. I love her. Because part of it is there's a culture thing. In this part of the world, in the culture of that day, there was a strong tradition of hospitality. If someone was a guest in your house, you had the duty to protect them and care for them. Even considering this, Rahab went much further than the respect of the cultural traditions regarding hospitality. She put her own life on the line for these men, because he could have come and killed her. But she says, oh, I think they left, you know, when they were closing the city gates. And she says, and it says in Joshua 2, verse 9, and she's got them up on the roof, and she says, now before they lay down, she came to them and said, I know that the Lord has given you the land, that the terror of you has fallen on us, and that all the inhabitants of the land are faint-hearted because of you. And then she tells of the things we have heard, and that's in one of her questions. What had she heard? How far did word spread? Without cell phones. But word has spread, for we heard how the Lord dried up the water of the Red Sea for you when you came out of Egypt. And we heard what you did to those two kings of the Amorites who were on the other side of the Jordan, Sihon and Og, whom you utterly destroyed. And as soon as we heard these things, our hearts melted. Neither did there remain any more courage in anyone because of you. But here's her declaration of faith. For the Lord your God, He is God in heaven above and on earth below. Somehow they hear this. She's in a pagan culture, but somehow she believes your God is the God, and you're going to win. And it says, when she says, I know that the Lord has given you this land, this surprising outburst of faith shows that God had a plan in bringing Rahab and the spies together. It is the same kind of thing we see when God supernaturally brings us to people who are believers or are open to the gospel. Have you ever gone into a store? Oh, we were planning to come here, but look, we met these people, and 2 weeks ago, we were in Drug Emporium. We forgot something. And Bill said, well, let's see if they have it at Drug Emporium. And then we go in there. He said, we were supposed to come here. And he met this couple that hadn't been to church in 2 years. He said, I know this is one of those divine appointments. And this is what the spies with Rahab, God wanted them to meet. For the Lord, from verse 9, when she says, for the Lord your God, he is God. Rahab's declaration was proof of her faith. Now, it might not have been great faith, it might have been strong faith, but it was faith. And her faith is commended in Hebrews 11 because she believed in that God and nobody else around her did. And so some people may be appalled that the fact that Rahab was a prostitute or that she was a liar. Some of the commentators make a big deal that, oh, she was a liar. I say, excuse me, she saved those spies. She helped the Israelites. So here's what this guy ends up saying, and I love it. Despite these facts, she was not saved by her works, but by her faith. She knew who God was, she knew who she was, and she trusted God for her very life. Yes, that's who Rahab was. Yes, she was. So, what was her responsibility? So she tells them, let me see, about verse 10, and then 11. Now, verse 12. Now, therefore, I beg you, swear to me by the Lord, since I have shown you kindness, that you will also show kindness to my father's house, and give me a true token, and spare my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters, and all that they have, and deliver our souls from death. So they answered her, our Lord's for yours. If none of you tells this business of ours, and it shall be when the Lord has given us the land that we will deal kindly and truly with you. So here's what she had to do. She says she let them out by a window because her house was on the wall of the city. She had to hang the scarlet cord from the window, and a lot of people think that's a symbol of the blood of Christ because that was going to save her family physically, but she had also believed, so she was going to be saved spiritually as well. So she had to hang the scarlet cord out the window. All her family members she wanted to save had to be in her house. And she mentioned father, mother, brothers, sisters, and the fact that they might have had families. It's going to be tight, folks, but they all have to be under her roof. And then you can't tell anyone what we're doing. If you tell anybody, deal's off, you're your own. But she obeyed. She did it. And some people think her being in the Hall of Faith was surprising. It really wasn't to me because I think I've heard of Rahab my whole life. It's like, so? She's there. God wanted her to be there. But some people apparently have an issue with the fact that she was a prostitute and she told a lie. God can choose and use anybody, anyone he wishes for any job. I mean, he used Nebuchadnezzar, okay? He can use anybody. And she believed in him. So the city of Jericho was wicked. It was pagan. We are told that the people perished for one reason. That's because they did not believe God. But again, Rahab's testimony of faith. I was going to read that. For the Lord your God, he is God. God in heaven above and on earth below. And that's like her declaration of faith. And now it says, this is so cool. This is one of the funnest things I found out about this lesson. Let's look at the incident on question 10 that brought the faith of two opposite people, Joshua and Rahab, together. So Jericho is a walled city. Scholars note that Jericho's walls were up to 25 feet high and 20 feet thick. That's pretty thick. So the conquest of this city was considered impossible. Now, think about how God already planned on how he's going to take the city. Now, Joshua sends these two spies on a reconnaissance mission. So, how did this reconnaissance mission actually help them in the battle, considering God already knew how he was going to take the city? Not at all. What information did they get that was going to help them in the battle? I don't believe any. Because here's why. It didn't help militarily, with military strategy, but it did encourage the faith of the spies and the rest of the people. Because remember when they sent out 10 spies at Kadesh Barnea, and they made a big deal of sending them out, and it was public, and then they all came back with a bad report. Boo! Joshua sent 2 spies out secretly, didn't tell everybody he's sending them. And they were greatly encouraged. And they came back and told Joshua, they're all scared of us. We got this, we got this. And to save Rahab and her family. They were supposed to meet. It's like Drug Emporium. We were supposed to be here to meet this lady so her family could get saved. Think of, and I don't know if it's David Guzik or somebody said, it shows the extent God goes to in bringing one woman and her father's house to salvation. God would send 2 spies from the Israelite camp to quote unquote reconnaissance mission to meet her so she can say, I believe you're God, and her family could be saved. And then there's another fun thing. Wait. I might have to save that for later. Oh, yeah. Okay, that's after the battle. See, I know things that are coming that you don't know yet, and I'm so excited. So they have the reconnaissance mission. They go home and tell Joshua, everybody's scared of us. We got this in the bag. And then Joshua has this encounter with the commander of the Lord's army, which Jesus in a pre-incarnate appearance in the Old Testament. So Joshua has this meeting. And so now the commander of the Lord's army gives him the battle plan. He's got all these, remember the tribes of Gad, and the 2.5 tribes on the other side had to come back fully armed, ready to fight, and they had to march before the other guys. And they have warriors who are prepared to fight. These are hunky guys that they do slingshots, they do bow and arrows, they throw hatchets, they know how to chop. They're probably like Green Beret guys. And they work out, and they don't lay around and eat chocolate and watch movies. They keep fit. And then Joshua tells them the battle plan. We're going to walk around the city once a day for 6 days. And then on the last 7th day, we're going to walk around 7 times. And then the priests are going to blow these horns, and everybody's going to yell, and the walls are going to fall down. What have I been doing push-ups for? It's like, So here's my point here. God gives them a battle plan, and maybe when he's telling people, they're a bit skeptical. But he says, okay, there are armed guards, the armed army guys are going to march in the front. They're going to have some of them in the front, and then you're going to have the 7 priests with the ram's horn, and then they're going to have the Ark of the Lord, and then there's going to be more armed guards behind him, and then all the people after them. So this is how the parade's going to work. So you might be skeptical about God's plan. So Joshua has to tell this to his men of war. Hello. But she mentions, do you think he might have been tempted to temper it? And I don't think so. I think if you just had an encounter with the commander of the Lord's armies, you're going to say exactly what he told you to say. And he did. Now here's what's neat. Because these are men of war, and they're prepared to do anything. You jump out of a helicopter, and then Joshua says, will you just march around the city and not say anything? And see, that's a step of faith for a big army guy, and you say, here's your mission. Walk around quietly and wait for the Lord to do it. And so for all these military guys to be willing to do what Joshua asked them to do, that's a step of faith for them. This is not what I thought we were going to do, ma'am, sir. I got my boots on. I'm ready to go to war. This is how we're going to war. And we're going to march around that city. Because God's going to win the battle. We're not going to. And so after this, oh my goodness. Sometimes when we're facing difficulties, as impenetrable as the walls of Jericho, what would faith ask of you in your circumstance? Is it going to be an act of obedience or waiting in faith? And we all face stuff like a 20-foot brick wall. It's like, God, what do you want me to do here? Am I to be a soldier and go up and actually do something? Or are you asking me to sit and pray and wait in faith? And sometimes it's one, it's sometimes the other, and we have to be able to know the difference. Often it's easier to fight than just sit and have faith. And she mentions, like, in the world, even if you fight, you have some respect because you fought. You may have fought and lost, but you fought. And faith always looks foolish to people in the world because they don't know what our faith is in. I know especially around Christmas time, people wear a shirt that says, believe. But you don't know what they believe. It's like, are you believing in Santa Claus or what? They don't know who our belief is in. The God of this world has blinded their eyes. And it looks like, because sometimes when we wait in faith to the world, it looks like we're not doing anything. Well, you're just sitting there. You don't know. I'm not just sitting here. I'm talking to the God of the universe. And he's got this. But like all these army guys under Joshua, had enough faith to believe that he had heard from God and we are going to do what you're asking us to do. So the day's finally there. They have their battle. They march around the city one time for 6 days. On the seventh day, they march around 7 times. And then Joshua tells the priests to blow their horns in a really loud blast, and then he says, shout. And 2 million people shouting? Yeah. And then the walls fall down, and they go straight up into the city. They get the victory because they followed directions God gave them. And then, did Joshua keep his word? Yep. He sent those same 2 spies because they knew where she'd be and what she looked. He couldn't send in other guys. They don't know who she was, where she was, what she looked like. So he sends in these guys. The 2 spies were sent. In fact, this is in Joshua chapter 6, I believe. Oh, where was that? Yes, Joshua 6:22. But Joshua had said to the 2 men who had spied out the country, go into the harlot's house, and from there bring out the woman and all that she has, as you swore to her. And the young men who had been spies went in and brought out Rahab, her father, her mother, her brothers, and all that she had. So they brought out all her relatives and left them outside the camp of Israel. So when they had the spoils of war, and I remember reading this, and it was like in Leviticus or Deuteronomy when they were fighting, they had captives, and sometimes they'd let them keep like the women for slaves or servants. And I remember reading, and I wish I'd have looked it up now, that if you see amongst the captives someone that you think you're going to like and want to be your wife, they still have to stay outside the camp. They have to be purified. Sometimes they made them just bathe. Sometimes it was shave all your hair so you're clean, and then it has to grow back, and after a certain amount of times, then you can take this woman to be your wife. So Rahab and her family are outside the camp. But it said, so she dwells in Israel to this day. And in Matthew 1:5, she is in the lineage of Christ because she married a man named Salmon. And see, in my romantic heart wants to say that maybe he was one of those spies. You don't know. Because he was the first one to see her. Well, let's just pretend for a moment. So she marries Salmon, whoever he was. She and Salmon have a baby. His name is Boaz. Boaz marries a foreigner named Ruth. They have a baby. His name is Obed. He has a baby. His name is David. Yes. And Rahab is in the lineage of Christ. And I thought, what better reward is there than that? It's like, oh my goodness. This was so cool. This was just so cool. So the last question I'm going to have you do in groups 2. How does the faith of Joshua and Rahab speak to you? So you can do that in your groups. But one other thing, in conquering, like they had a city to conquer, and they had way more battles after. Oh, I forgot to go back to that after this question. Question 5 that I was going to put after they'd had a battle. Do you think that they thought everything was, did they assume the rest of their battles would be this easy? They weren't. There was one where there were 5 kings against one, but God gave, they were still resting in the promises God had made them. And we're going to have battles in our lives. Some are going to be easy. God's going to knock down the wall and we won't have to do anything. Some are going to be hard and we're going to have to work for it. And conquering our battles, yours and mine, our promised lands, we're going to have lots of battles, and some will be easier than others. Some will be short Jerichos, march around, walls fall down. Others will be more difficult, long and drawn out, like 5 kings to 1. Some will require that you fight. Others require that you wait. God still promises, I will never leave you nor forsake you. Therefore, I say to you today, be strong and of good courage, for God has the battle. Thank you. Okay, go to get coffee, get tea, hug a friend, go find your group.